Let's start over. Okay. We'll start over because we just started recording. My name is Samira, Hanessian, Energy Policy Director with IEC, and I'm thrilled to welcome all on the line today to today's Lunch and Learn Deep Dive, You, Me, and Clean Energy with our Executive Director and resident powerhouse, Jen Walling. Really happy to be here with you, Jen. Just some brief housekeeping notes. So since 1975, the Illinois Environmental Council, IEC, has worked to safeguard Illinois, its people, its plants and animals, and the natural systems on which all life depends on building power for people and the environment. If you are not already a member of IEC and are able to give, please consider joining today by using the link in the chat box. All attendees are muted by default. If you joined via Zoom, please use the chat function to ask questions, add comments, or provide resources. Time permitting, we will take live questions at the end of the session. And for those joining by phone, please use *9 to raise your hand. So with that said, welcome everyone. We are here to share some stories about the clean energy journey in Illinois. Many of you on the line have been an integral part of the fight to realize a clean and renewable energy future and combat climate change. Many of you have worked to set the roadmap and lay the foundation for an equitable transition from fossil fuel dependence. And it's probably safe to say that all of you on the line are here because you're interested in learning the details of how we got here. So whether you fall on the advocacy spectrum, wherever you fall on that spectrum, we have you covered. Good, the bad, the political unicorns of the clean energy fight, and what's next as we continue to implement the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA. So with that, Jen, it is so good to be here with you. You took the helm as IEC's executive director 12 years ago in 2011. What were the big policy issues at the time? And what was different about the way you advocated and lobbied for the pro-climate agenda?
Yeah, so 2011 was absolutely an incredibly different time than where we're at now. And it's really good to reflect on how much progress we've made, because I think we think about from year to year, we think about the urgency of addressing climate change. And sometimes this progress seems so slow. It seems like it's not happening. Even with the big step we made with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act last year, we have a lot we got to get done. So it's definitely good to look back and reflect. And one of the major differences in 2011 when I started, and I know many of you have done this, I've done this job from 2011. I've been organizing in the environmental sector for a decade or more than that. I know some of you have done this work for decades. And even in 2011, we could not discuss climate change. That was not something that was lawmakers were well educated on. I don't think even our governor, who was very supportive of renewable energy, Governor Pat Quinn, I don't think he would even start a discussion with talking about climate change. And I know that we did not have a pro-climate change majority in Springfield, nothing even close to that. So when we are working in 2011, the fight that we were taking on clean energy issues was really much more of a pure pollution fight, air pollution, water pollution, land pollution that were from these facilities. I think there was some knowledge of climate change and where we were going, but that was not the messaging that we were using. And so 2011 was a very interesting year. And, I'm just going to start with talking about the drama that was happening that year. And we have, I had just started, was brand new to this coalition, and our coalition at the time was deeply fractured. We had really important goals that we wanted to accomplish with energy efficiency, with expanding the renewable portfolio standards, and other pieces of clean energy. And there was also other fights going on in Springfield at the time. So one of them was the ComEd smart grid fight that was happening in 2011 to upgrade the whole grid, which would be a major rate increase and major technology increase. And then in addition to that, there was still a strong push at the time, 2011, 2012, 2013, for the state to fund different new coal power plants and coal gasification plants. And so one of those plants that was on the table in 2011 was Tenaska, which was a coal plant that, not coal gasification, coal. And it was a coal plant that would do some carbon sequestration theoretically, would theoretically be very clean compared to other coal plants. And we had different environmental groups on different sides. So the renewable fix, the energy efficiency stuff were added to the smart grid bill, and they were added to the coal plant bill. And there were, I think Sierra Club especially was very opposed to the coal plant bill. And there were several folks that were working on and the additions of renewables to the coal plant bill. And it was a mess, and especially IEC were supposed to be the convener, the coalition organization that moves everybody in the right direction. And I had to just watch and see what was happening. And I learned so much just from those huge divisions that were happening, and learned a lot about the perspective on each bill, and was able to talk to people in the Capitol about what was happening with each of them. But to say it was awkward is an understatement, just in the fighting within our own community. And I think the key thing that we all learned from the work that happened there was that when we are divided, we just cannot get as much done. And I'm really proud that since that moment, since 2011, and the smart grid bill did pass with some energy efficiency, some renewables that still needed some work, but some renewables fixed. When we did that, we have never been divided since on the full strategy that we wanted to get to. I think there's some minor branches, minor pathways that happen throughout the years, but we have really worked to stay together and increase our power and ability to get things done, which is shown by the results. And I will, it is fascinating to only look back a decade and look at, the Tenaska plant was being considered at the time. The Future Gen facility was being considered for federal funding at the time. And then Leucadia and Power Holdings were two other facilities that were going to be coal gasification plants. Leucadia in particular was going to be on the southeast side of Chicago, where our Southeast Environmental Task Force does all of its work. And it is just insane to think about that we were considering funding these coal gasification plants, especially with the price of natural gas having dipped as low as it did after that. In 2011, natural gas was extremely high. Fracking had not yet really, it was out there, it was being done, but it wasn't producing natural gas in the major way that it is now. But so in 2011, fracking was not it was not as major. Natural gas prices were really high. So we're looking to actually convert coal into natural gas. And to think about what a bad economic investment that would have been for the state to make. I can be proud about our work for pollution reasons, but I'm also proud of our work for that as well, because that would have been such a bad idea for the state of Illinois. So I'm really glad that we were able to defeat those proposals. So yeah, just a really, really different world, very divided, but learned a whole lot. And then the smart grid bill went into effect.
So it wasn't until 2016 that the state of Illinois passed the Future Energy Bill, FEJA, that opened the door to a local renewable energy market. And we have seen incredible taxpayer benefits as energy efficiency and renewable energy incentives created under FEJA continue to expand. Illinois is unique to have FEJA, and other states are still developing their own energy roadmaps. Jen, what is important for us to know about the fight for FEJA?
Saying that your audio quality is not good, so we'll take you off mute when we do that. We'll try that a little bit. So yeah, we're standing next to each other, so trying out each other's audio. But we'll get that fixed. So the question Samira asked was about the Future Energy Jobs Act. So of course that takes us up to December of 2016. And I think, between 2011 and 2016, there were some minor bills that had to do with ComEd, some, fixes to the formula rate that was out there. There were some, a $30 million solar bill that Representative Gable put together. But there were some changes to energy, but they were not as large between 2011 and 2016. So there were some accomplishments there. But I think we saw major changes in, of course, the federal political system and also in the Illinois political system between 2011 and 2016. Of course, we saw former Governor Bruce Rauner take office in 2015. And so that was a change from Governor Pat Quinn. And then we also saw President Trump win at the end of 2016. And I think also in there was this work on the Clean Power Plan. So the Obama administration, one of the last pieces that they put together on the way out, which on the way out, I say, but it was with 2 years to spare, we started, I think the Clean Jobs Coalition really we started some meetings in 2014, 2015 on the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. And it was in response to Obama's Clean Power Plan. And we organized a lot of work around making comments at some of the federal hearings that were held in Chicago. We're really working on support for that Clean Power Plan and, unique naming. We had introduced the Clean Jobs Act in Illinois, and that was our first foray into a large piece of legislation that we were working to put together. And, of course, I mentioned, Bruce Rauner took hold during that time period. And, there are some major shifts in the way we looked at energy. One of the pieces that I think was really important when we put the Clean Jobs Act in is that on day one, when we introduced the Clean Jobs Act in the Illinois House, we had 6 or 7 Republican sponsors up front. And I don't know, I'm storytelling. So one of the pieces with having Republicans on board at the time, I think there were a lot more moderate Republicans in the Illinois General Assembly before the supermajority really took hold. And so that was useful. But one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do you talk to Republicans about climate change? And one of the pieces that I often say is that you don't have to. And when you're messaging to somebody who maybe doesn't believe in the science, doesn't understand the science, I should say, if you're messaging to somebody who doesn't understand the science of climate change, one of the pieces to look at is what do they care about? Often pollution is something that is bipartisan in its work, but of course, more and more of that pollution fighting is seen as environmental regulation and excessive environmental regulation. But one of the pieces that these Republicans particularly cared about, and all of them were in the suburbs, they cared a lot about jobs and economic investment. And they saw working on the Clean Jobs Act and bringing a fix to the renewable energy standards, increasing energy efficiency that was in our bill. They saw that as a way to increase economic diversification, that we're not having all of our energy sources in one basket, that we're increasing other energy sources. So they saw it as really good economic policy and were able to sign on the day we put the Clean Jobs Act in. And so I think that was really useful in being able to move our bill forward was the bipartisanship in the Illinois House, and really helpful. I think that was the time period where, we had this bill and we're moving it forward, just got a lot of support that we were able to increase some of our lobby days from the early days of 200 to more like 400 or 500, and really got a lot of petition signatures in. But of course, by the time we got into 2016, I think there's another question about Trump and Rauner as well. But as the time we got into 2016, we passed this bill knowing the Clean Power Plan was not going to go into effect. I guess the other piece here that I think is controversial in terms of passage and how we get things done, I still think the environmental community, we are really growing in power, but we definitely need allyship from other stakeholders in order to have the power that we needed. And it was the case at the time too. I think the votes that we had dedicated to environment and climate change were even smaller in 2014, 2015, especially with having a governor that wasn't too interested in this. And the other thing going on at the time was, of course, that the Clinton and Quad Cities nuclear power plants were not making money, and they were coming to the Illinois General Assembly with an ask for a lot of money. They eventually ended up with $200 million a year. And so these prices at these nuclear power plants were not enough to keep them open. There's a ton of jobs there, and there was a lot of support from labor to make a difference. But I think I'll stop there, and we'll get to other impacts that had. And I think I'm going to go on mute and maybe just take yourself off mute.
There's a delay on my end. All right. So here in Illinois and in Chicago, each policy we pass is arguably more and more equitable to bring affordable clean energy online to all. Jen started to speak to this, and the reason equity continues to be prioritized is credited to the tireless organizing and advocacy by environmental justice communities. Our most impacted neighbors have not been afraid to call out policy planning for moving too quickly and continue to provide insights into resource planning needed for policies to succeed. So with that, what are some lessons from FEJA? And I know you started to dive into getting closer to the CEJA timeline, but what other energy policy work that we should know about to do better moving forward?
Sure. So I think that one of the biggest things that I learned through all of this was just so much from environmental justice groups and the way that they organize and the way that they are bringing up the thoughts and concerns and lessons that their communities have learned into their organizing effort. And I definitely have changed so much because of our relationships with those environmental justice organizations. And, there were a few times I can remember, El Vejo or People for Community Recovery just dipping down to Springfield for a day on an issue. And People for Community Recovery worked with a lot on a Cook County landfill bill, other items that, just these environmental justice groups were, not well resourced and not able to be active participants. And when we wrote the Clean Jobs Act, I think that I understood we made several mistakes. And one of those was doing a lot of drafting without environmental justice groups involved at all. And another was, we invited them to the meeting. We put them on the calendar invite. We put them on the listserv, and they did not attend. And I did not realize at the time that that was not a real invitation. And that in order to get folks to the table, and I don't care if it's an environmental justice organization or a lawmaker or any other type of group, there's definitely resourcing that needs to happen to make sure that the people that you're bringing to the table have the background knowledge, have the lay of the land, are resourced, and have the capacity to fully participate in the work that you're doing. And we didn't do that work. And so there was definitely a lot of commotion in our discussion in that time period. And, I think also there's a bit where I think, especially before we passed FEJA, there was definitely more of a fight over strategy that was about, if we're going to tackle climate change, some of these low-income programs are more expensive. So, if you're going to be focusing on low-income communities, you're going to have to pay 100% of the cost. If you're working with a really wealthy community, you might put 10% of the cost in and they can match it and that sort of thing. And, there is the cap and invest model where there's investments that are going back to each person, right? And it was sort of seen as how do we get to responses to climate change the quickest? Like, how do we do this in a way that just brings everything through, no matter what the costs might be to customers, no matter what changes it might make in people's quality of life, especially low-income people. It was just at all costs, move this forward. And that is and was wrong, in a wrong way to look at things. And so having that perspective where environmental justice communities brought to us their concerns about environmental hotspots, about just the impact that some of these policies can have on rates and costs, I think are things that have made us more successful in the long run, because being able to listen to those rate concerns, for example, and making sure that we have options to keep customers' rates low through things like energy efficiency, just critical, not only in the justice response in our piece of legislation, but in the political work that we're doing of making sure that there is that connection there. So, all of that were things that we learned. So just how do we work with funders to make sure that they're resourcing environmental justice organizations so they can participate? And one of the things with FIJA, Juliana Pino was one of the first environmental justice participants to sit at the table in those negotiations. And I think there was a bit, and I'll save this story for the next one, but Juliana was one of the first people, to be in that negotiating room. And then this most recent, we definitely had Delmar Gillis just being a strong voice in that room. That stuff is critical. And we're still, I think there is diversity in a lot of places that is growing, but most of these rooms in Springfield are still white men, and white men who tend to be over 50 years old. And so that is definitely an intimidating place for somebody who's a person of color, who's a woman, who's younger, to walk into. And so I think we have helped change that narrative, and the people that we've brought into these negotiating rooms in a way that is great for the legislation, but needs to grow, needs to be expounded on, in whose voices are heard in Springfield the loudest.
Okay, thank you for that. So as we've covered so far, the environmental movement saw major wins in 2016 and 2019, despite the Rauner and Trump administrations dismantling environmental compliance agencies and initiating constant rollbacks on crucial environmental policies. Can you share a glimpse into what effect politics at the time had on environmental policy?
Sure. I think that the work that we did during the Rauner administration, the rollbacks in the Trump administration, are still things that we feel today. There is so much difference in Illinois agencies. I think some of the changes to Illinois agencies happened as early as the Blagojevich administration, especially with things like Department of Natural Resources that were cut so much during that administration. And then hiring freezes and all of those things that happened during even the Quinn administration. And definitely the Rauner administration, the state suffered a 2-year budget impasse where we had no budget whatsoever. There's just a loss of federal funds. There were so many challenges. We saw our Illinois State Museum close and lose its accreditation, and then have to be reopened and pay to reaccredit later. There were just so many challenges that happened during that time. And I think especially the budget impasse, especially the way that state workers were treated during that time, still lingers in what is happening now and our ability to implement CEJA and get things done. The state agencies, you'll go into a lot of them and you have this workforce that is just missing almost a couple decades worth of ages of people, because you have folks that have been there and stayed through the Quinn and Rauner administration, are there today, that maybe are getting at the end of their pension, ready to retire. And then you have new people that are being hired during the Pritzker administration that just haven't gotten fully into the job yet. just right now, coupled with the Great Resignation and the job market being the way that it is, just these things struggle. And I think that these struggles with agencies started during the Rauner administration and still persist today, and are going to continue to be challenges as we try to implement CEJA. I do think with the Rauner administration, the thing that was a little different compared to today was the power of the Illinois Manufacturers Association and the industrial users that are in Springfield. And they were able, in last minute negotiations with the Rauner administration, like the bill was agreed to by environmental groups with labor unions. We were ready to go. And last minute, they a number of the energy efficiency portions were cut out, theoretically because of the cost, but just a lot of savings for consumers were removed from the bill last minute. And then another piece that just completely took industrial users out of the energy efficiency program completely was removed. And that was really just shocking, because those are some users who were paying quite a bit into the system and saying that they didn't benefit. But see, these are some of the businesses that do need to engage in energy efficiency work, that are doing a lot of things that cause climate change. And I do think that in other states, they've looked at, in New York in particular, they've looked across the manufacturing sector for climate reductions. And I think that's coming, and I think it's going to be worse because of what happened during the Rauner administration. So all of those items were pulled out, and industry and manufacturing definitely had a lot more power than they have today, where they opposed the Climate Equitable Jobs Act as it was passing. But so, I think those were huge changes. And I think it was, on the other hand, the FEJA, which was the biggest piece of climate legislation passed in 2016 in the country, or 2017. It was a very enormous piece of legislation that was passed nationally, which now we look at and it's tiny compared to all of those 100% things. But at that time, it was huge. And it passed a month after Trump won in November. It passed in December of 2016. And that's to say, we're talking about energy today, but we did have a lot of big wins during the Rauner administration, whether it was school-led testing or FEJA, some other bills as well. But a lot of challenges, and politics just does make a difference. When we get to talking about CEJA, there's so much that this governor did that CEJA would not be as strong or as great as it is today without the political pressure of the governor and his staff.
Thanks for that. And Jen, something we can all appreciate about you is your willingness to be honest about the legislative process. We are all proud and enjoying just marinating in the joys of passing the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act nearly a year ago. And nonetheless, the work continues and the road to implementation is being built in real time. From your perspective, what will it take to stay on track and implement CEJA? I do want to encourage you to be honest about the positives and even how we can ensure state government is resourced for success.
Great. That is a great question. And I do think as we're working on implementing the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, we are seeing challenges, absolutely. And I think that there are a number of workforce and state agency challenges that we are facing that I'm hopeful that will be overcome. So I think I do think, worldwide this year in 2022, whether it's IEC or it's, the DCO, hiring is difficult. We're seeing a job market where there's very little unemployment. I think they're just generally in the nation, there are people who are choosing not to enter back into the workforce after COVID or are nervous about entering into the workforce after COVID. And I think that is a huge challenge, and wages going up. I think that at state government, you've still got very low wages, sometimes more than nonprofit wages, but you're still seeing very low wages at state government. And I definitely think, I often, one of the things I say to folks a lot is that the ideal bill is not ideal if you can't pass it, which just means you could write the best bill possible, but if you can't put it into law, it's just as bad as the worst bill. Well, the corollary to that is you can pass the ideal bill, and if you have somebody awful implementing it, they can just crush it to pieces. Or even if you pass a mediocre bill, if you had somebody awesome in there, they can do a great job and get it done in a really great way. So getting great people into state government needs to be an absolute priority right now. And I definitely am concerned, and it's definitely something that we're going to work on. We're going to let people know about what job postings are available. The CMS website for all these postings can be a little bit unreadable, but I do want to encourage people, and especially young people, to go consider state government as a place to work. I think there are a lot of jobs that are out of Springfield. There are some more remote state government jobs now, more than there were before. A lot of testing with remote work. And I'm hoping that more and more of these jobs will be in the Chicago area for state government because of the high need for some of these programs, especially with some of the federal money that's out there. So I think that things are progressing. We're a little behind on a lot of the things, but we've seen some good pieces go into place, whether it's, updates to the long-term renewable plan. The beneficial electrification is at least out there, and we're weighing in on comments with respect to that. With the workforce hubs, there's at least folks that are hired to create some of the programs, and they're doing the hiring on the regional. I think there may be some hires made. And so I think that stuff is moving, and that's really exciting, but we need to get more great people into state government, and this is the time to be innovative. I think we're all looking at the races that are ahead, and we can't take anything for granted, but I don't think we're going to see a shift in who is governor after November 8th. So I do think we're gonna, in 2 months from now, just be seeing the same administration get another 4 years. And so if that's the case, focusing on the agency, making sure there's great people that are excited about putting the governor's directives into effect and want to prioritize climate change is going to make a huge difference in implementation. So I don't know if you're one of those people, know some of those people, please look at state government as a place that you can work, because we need you.
So before we shift to Q&A, Jen, inquiring minds want to know about the funniest and the most dramatic moments during the CEJA fight. What tea can you spill?
I think the most fun thing about doing this work, which can be so hard because, I live in Chicago, and I think that part of this job is important to be both in Chicago and Springfield, because there are so many lawmakers up here to get to know. There's so many connections to make up here. And with, with Springfield, it's really incredibly important to be in Springfield, but there's 3.5 hours between those two locations. So it can be just a really, really difficult life, really, really difficult job to do. But I think it's really important. So I do think, I don't know if this is the funniest, but it definitely is so fun to have the team that we have, and all of the folks that did come down to Springfield and work even during the pandemic when we all were masked, or even before getting vaccinated. There were times that we were in the pandemic, and Jack Darren, JC Kibbe, Delmar Gillis, all of those folks that did a lot of the negotiating and writing and drafting. Melina Hessel, who is at ELPC. I'm just so proud of the work that was put in. I know there's probably people on this call whose names I am not saying, but it just was they just make things so much better. And there were definitely a lot of nights where we camped in the IEC office in our conference room and got pizza, got Thai food for everybody, just enjoyed the night and met all night long trying to figure out what was going to go next in some of the negotiations. And it was something that was really enormously frustrating, especially as we got into 2021. And you'll remember we introduced the first Clean Energy Jobs Act, which, just a slight difference from the Clean Jobs Act that we had introduced previously, but we introduced the first Clean Energy Jobs Act in 2019. I think there was a lot of drama around the introduction. We split from some of the renewable energy companies that had their own Path to 100 bill, and we were fighting with some of our friends. And I think that was super dramatic, made me really sad in a lot of ways to be on the other side, really, of some people who are very good people. And, that part was dramatic. And then all of the ComEd pieces that came up during the legislation, the different revelations from the speaker changing during any of this, just dramatic political moments that really were very tied, like all of the drama happening in Springfield, so tied to all of this energy work, and just really, really challenging. So I think those were pieces, but the most dramatic and the toughest part was definitely 2021. And in 2021, we were working really hard. Like there had been negotiations that had started and stopped in 2019, 2020. We get into 2021, there's hardcore negotiations. There's people in the Capitol every day, masking, taking the PCR test, coming in and doing these negotiations in back rooms. And in different back rooms, there was kind of different ones for the House, for the Senate, for the governor's office, of different involvement with different people. And so that was a little of what was going on. And then I think the toughest night was May 31st. We really, really thought that we had a deal. We did not have a deal, but we were there until 2 or 3 in the morning. I know that we really thought we were there, and then, went to bed at 2 or 3, and then started getting texts again at 6 in the morning on June 1st. So just weren't able to pass it. And then we went through that fire drill again and again. We tried again in June. We tried again in July. We tried again in August. And there were different parts where they went into legislative session, and we just didn't get where we needed to get on any of these. Just a constant fire drill. It was really, really exhausting. You couldn't plan any vacations, even though you really needed one. And especially after May 31st of any year, you want to take a break. There were no breaks. But it was really nice to, get to the point of September, and we were there. We had the piece of legislation, and it was really, really strong. There were parts where people wanted to not close all the coal plants, and that was the last fight that was there. And the governor's office just really stood strong and proud. And, they needed a bill that actually took carbon out of the system in addition to putting new capacity on board. And I think it was in the House, the bill, it was signed on September 15th, 2021. So we're 1 week away from the 1-year anniversary. Passed the Senate on September 13th. I think it was September 10th or 9th. That was the House bill. I think it was September 9th. And it was really neat that a lot of the lobbyists that were there working from our side were invited into the governor's office, and sat and watched the debate with the governor and a number of his key staff, and we stole their pizza, and just were really able to thank him for all the amazing work he did, and gossip about the people who were speaking and how mad we were at some people who were no's and happy we were at the people who were yeses. And then just seeing that final vote, which included a very bipartisan roll call, and then heading over, we knew the Senate was just kind of perfunctory at that point, but heading there and really celebrating with a lot of senators who got us in that direction. And I think that was really cool. And then, getting it signed into law, and now we are definitely hard at work. And I just, it's just really cool to see the way that the power of the environmental community has grown over what's kind of a short time period. But, I know we still need more, but I don't know, like there's a lot of times where we may look at something that we did and it's not everything we wanted. So we say it's the first step. And sometimes we put a damper on being able to celebrate. And this is definitely not one of those places. We really passed it. But despite that, we have more work to do. I think we also just need to continue to keep celebrating because not celebrating is a little toxic. Not celebrating our wins, even if we still have more work to do, it's not a human way to go about moving things forward. So I'm really excited about the celebration that's coming in the next couple of weeks. I know we have a CEJA documentary that the Clean Jobs Coalition is putting out. But I'm really, really proud of the work that we were able to put together, et cetera. And I'm kind of wrapping up some of my comments. I know Samira has more here, but we're really happy to take questions. So if folks have them, and I'd prefer these be a little bit of storytelling questions of how we did this rather than asking me what's in the bill, because I can answer those anytime. And I'm trying to talk more about how we did the thing we did and how we could apply it to other areas. So I think I'm going to pass it to you to close a little bit, but please put questions in the chat or raise your hand. We could take you off mute. So.
Great. Pretty much, I was just going to thank you so much for answering my questions and open it up to everyone. So just from a housekeeping perspective, for those using Zoom, you can add your questions to the chat or use the raise your hand function so that we can open up the line to you. And then for those joining by phone, please use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute and ask a question. In terms of the type of questions we're looking for, as Jen said, anything that can lead to an anecdotal answer would be ideal. But please feel free. I currently don't see any hands raised or questions, but please throw them at us. Okay, so I do see one in the chat. Just pulling it up here. So what did we learn about the coalition for the latest CEJA bill passage, and how different is that coalition from past coalitions?
Great. I definitely think that over the years from when we kind of started the coalition, which was 2014, 2015, we've gained a lot more structure, and we've been able to put the structure in a way that allows the coalition to act quickly, but still allows deliberation, which is really important for community level organizations that maybe have less resources, don't meet as much. Everybody has jobs that are not in the environmental field, so they may need more time to discuss. And I do think, I cannot believe I have not yet once mentioned Listen, Lead, Share, which was a vital part of how we put the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act together in the first place, was doing listening, was going around to different areas of the, state. And I think we had one in every Senate district, and did some focus groups, did some listening, got some feedback from different individuals. And I think that was a really great way to put it together. And I think in terms of the coalition, I think we were able to add definitely more environmental justice and community-based organizations and make sure that they were able to participate, particularly in areas where we maybe didn't have as many people. So I thought that was really important. We had a business table that was able to bring not just solar businesses, but other businesses to be able to work together with us on the legislation and show off their projects. I think that was really important. But I think just bigger and better, we did have some participation from labor, especially SEIU Local 1, which has really prioritized climate change for its members. And it just was really unique and powerful to bring on all of those community level voices.
Okay, perfect. Anna Garcia, I do see your question on the CEJA film. Tucker with our comms team is going to respond in line with more information for you. Next question. If Jen could please comment on the dynamics of the urban versus rural legislators and CEJA. Any guidance for future energy transition concerns?
Yeah, so definitely we're seeing more, I think, and more the way that politics is going within Illinois and maybe the United States, we are seeing fewer Democrats elected to really rural areas, and even some of the small downstate city areas. And we're seeing more and more Democrats elected to suburban areas. DuPage County, almost all Democratic lawmakers at this point. And when I grew up there were 0 Democratic lawmakers. So just kind of changes in those shifts. And there's some ways that I've appreciated that, because the fewer and fewer Democratic lawmakers that are boosters of coal that are within the caucus are helpful, because there are a number of reasons they want to elect people within the caucus. They may want to support people that have coal in their backyard and need things. Despite that, it might not be very good for the environment. So I definitely think we got a lot more urban support than we did from rural lawmakers. And I definitely think we should continue to do work there. I definitely I'm just really excited in all of the state traveling that I have done recently. I just did a trip to Alton and the Metro East, and I see a lot of great, fantastic Christine from Sierra Club and just some fantastic people from Metro East who are on. And then I also just did an awesome trip to Carbondale and Shawnee. And on my way back, I'm seeing so many utility scale solar places. I'm seeing so many homes that have solar on it that I would have seen 0 even just a couple of years ago. So I think the more and more people put up solar panels, that they invest in these technologies, the better it's going to be to get downstate lawmaker support for increasing these policies. I think it's really, really important, and we need to show them off. We need to show the facilities that are being built, show the economic investment, let folks know about the property tax impacts that they're having, and that this is important to their constituents too. So I think that it's critical to not only, a lot of these places are where the coal plants, coal mines are closing, and they may be taking property taxes, maybe taking jobs from the area, and making sure that that's not the story that is being told, and that people all over the state are receiving the benefits is just critical. And of course, just really big thanks to Joyce for all of the work that she is doing and the way she has inspired me for almost 20 years now on coal and coal extraction. And I think we got more work we got to do on that stuff as well. So I think we just keep telling the story, and we're going to get support quicker than we think to be able to continue to expand this, even with what's happening with Ameren right now.
So on a related note, are you concerned about efforts to weaken CEJA? And if so, how can we work to prevent that?
I didn't even see the next question, and I already just referenced Ameren in a cryptic way. So, what's happening right now, the MISO grid, PJM is the area where ComEd is, which is a lot of northern and western Illinois. The MISO grid is basically downstate, and it's Ameren and it's ComEd. There are, of course, rural electric utilities, municipal utilities in various places of the state as well. But those are the grids that we're doing work in. And ComEd has made some choices that have been really good for capacity, has been really good for renewable energy. Ameren is down there making some poor choices, and the MISO grid has seen really challenges with capacity. I think the challenges clearly were a bit overestimated because they were predicting frequent rolling brownouts and blackouts, and we did not see any of that over the summer. But definitely, they saw those concerns, and there was some blame on CEJA for these rate increases, which every state was having the same rate increases. So so that it's not CEJA that is having that impact. And it's just so funny that MISO and Ameren, they want to encourage these solutions that are causing the problems that are causing brownouts. So they want to encourage policies that are going to increase climate change, which are going to increase extreme weather events, which are going to increase the capacity issues. And Ameren is not letting renewable energy onto the grid in a speedy enough way, despite that there is a huge demand for it and a huge demand for capacity. So I'm concerned there. There is a bill right now on Ameren rate relief, which we need to look closely at, but Ameren customers do need rate relief, and customers in Missouri and other states are receiving that from their states. And so I think making sure that there is rate relief for Ameren customers, I think is really important, but we need to make sure that it's not done in a way that will weaken CEJA. I know that there are pieces where we would like to see tweaks to CEJA to make it stronger. We talk about where the strategy is going, and I think, it'll be really interesting because we do have a new speaker. We do have a new Senate president. It does seem like they do want to address energy issues in a package way, much like Speaker Madigan did. And so I do get concerned if we want to make changes, other people will want to make changes. We did a technical fix this year that was really just like adding the word customer rebate to the workforce programs to make sure the money was going in the right place. It was what was agreed to, and a whole bunch of other stuff was added. We were cool with the stuff that ended up getting added. But there was a whole big effort to try to add stuff that we weren't really into at all. And I think that, it was good in some ways. There were 6 amendments that were put forward, and we looked at some of those amendments. It was good to see what people asked for. Definitely the industrial customers and the manufacturers have really strong asks of things that they would like to repeal to make sure nothing applies to them. I think they need to be cautious about that, because I think that manufacturing and industrial users are a really big source of carbon emissions that is going to be pursued in the future to reduce their carbon emissions. And so I think that is really important. There were also efforts to add carbon sequestration laws that would be really bad for so we're not huge fans of carbon sequestration, but really bad for the landowners that would be allowing their land to be available for carbon sequestration. Really problematic. So we saw a lot of things that were being pushed, and we kind of know what people want. So I think we'll need to be cautious in moving forward on the power sector. And I suspect that a lot of our climate change efforts will be in the transportation, building sector. Nature-based climate solutions are really going to be a push that we see in the future. Natural gas energy efficiency is so behind, and I think that is a really big problem for low-income customers. So I do think there are going to be efforts to weaken CEJA. I don't think they're going to pass while Governor Pritzker is governor, because I think he will veto all of them. And so I think we need to keep working on it and make sure it's a piece that is solid and that we're going to have people in place to support it as it goes ahead. But I think there'll be efforts. I think they'll be unsuccessful.
And then this question is very much related.
not sure if there is more that can be said, but a gap in the state energy transition that is missing is a clear path forward for closure of coal mines that are not voluntary. There appears to be only more demand for coal coming from international markets. Any comments on that?
Sure. We should go back to great. Yeah. So coal mining and extraction too, really important. And yeah, I think I'm unsure on the strategy we're going to go in terms of coal mining, in terms of pipelines, in terms of other things that are promulgating carbon emissions, particularly that don't necessarily happen within the state, but help facilitate them in other parts of the country. I think those industries continue to be problematic. And you look at coal mines in Illinois, there are no union coal mine workers left in the state, except that they unload, there's some union mine workers that unload the barges in Alton. And most of these facilities, you look at the number of people that work there, and a lot of them have gone from like 300 in the 80s to like 5, like literally 5 to run a longwall mine in certain places. So it's just really troubling that we still continue to support this industry. You know, I think we need to continue to educate about it. We need to make sure that we get folks in the department in place who are willing to make sure that these mines are held accountable. I think the governor should work towards a moratorium on new coal mines. We shouldn't be opening up any new mines. And we have seen with this governor some quiet progress on some new mines. But we've also seen other mines get their permits and head into place. And so I do think we need to work on regulatory reform there. The banner mine rules from, how old is that settlement now? It's over a decade old. That we need to make sure that those rules for public participation are put into place. So I do think extraction is a really vital part. And I'm not sure why politically it presents so many challenges. So we'll need to continue to keep working on it.
Okay, and I heard a little hint around workforce. So it is asking if there are primary groups leading on CEJA implementation. She's specifically thinking of any pieces that have to do with reskilling of workforce or skilling first in line folks like returning citizens, foster care, alumni, and perhaps vulnerable youth.
And that was a piece of the Future Energy Jobs Act we started with that we're really proud of, was instituting for the first time some of those job training programs that were targeted towards returning citizens, foster care alumni. And one of my highlights of this entire, right before the pandemic and right before, we had the biggest in-person lobby day we have ever had. So like 700 people, like 12 buses of people that just came down to Springfield. And it was just really, really exciting. And I was fortunate enough to be able to walk around a whole bunch of workers who were in those job training programs to talk to different lawmakers and take pictures. They were from various different districts related to Elevate Energy. And it was just really neat to hear them tell the story and how excited they were. I know a lot of them are in those jobs now, but there was a dip in the job market from both the pandemic and then the solar jobs cliff. But we're seeing those people get into job placements, and that's really exciting. And of course, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act really increased those job training programs, workforce training hubs, et cetera. The Clean Jobs Coalition is still leading on implementation, and there are, I think, 6 billion subcommittees that are available. So I definitely encourage groups, if you're not a member of the Clean Jobs Coalition, make sure that you are and that you get on these different things. We even have like Samira does a couple weekly newsletter. And then I got to point to Deontay Moore from IEC, who's our Green Jobs Workforce Program Director. If you have direct questions about that, maybe Deontay can put his email in the chat. And if you want to know how some of that stuff is going, he's just doing a great job doing the tracking on both jobs and economic justice and the Just Transition Fund work. And I will, at that point, Samira Hanessian is our energy policy director who just started, and Sergio Vargas is on, who Sergio is doing a lot of the community-based organization connection work. So we have some really great people who are doing the work for us now. And you can be in touch with me, but hopefully I'm going to get to a point where I don't entirely know all the answers. And I've got some great staff who can do this, because we got other work we want to do. I think I'm really excited about my nature-based climate solutions work and the way that we're going to move forward on our Illinois is Beautiful campaign to bring in federal funding for conservation and conservation agriculture. I just think that piece is so important. We have such great, beautiful areas in Illinois. So that's what I'm excited about working on next. But we have reached 1 p.m. So I think I'm going to let Samira close. I'll put my email in the chat, but I think I know a lot of people on here, and I am very happy to take questions later. And I've really enjoyed this time to get all my fun stories out. So putting that in there, and I'm going to let Samira close.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. Just want to thank everybody for being on. I've had a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And recordings of each session in the Lunch and Learn series, including this one, can be found on IEC's YouTube channel and our website. Again, if you are not already a member of IEC and are able to give, please consider joining today by joining the link in the chat box. Thank you, everyone.